time to deploy the Banshee Stone unopposed. It will shatter the cage. The Chosen turned as an ancient Black Legion Stormbird settled nearby in a cloud of dust. Down the craft's ramp came a broad grav platform, the rune-carved dais flanked by acolytes. An energy field rose up from the dais, holding aloft a twisted shard of crystal the size of a boarding torpedo. The stone surface was carved with screaming faces, and energies the colour of a livid bruise pulsed within its depths. Lord Zorphus issued his orders as the Banshee Stone was guided towards the wide, packed earth ramp that descended into the shadowed pit. Dorsgog, you and your Terminator brethren shall accompany me into the pit.
All right.
The rest of you, spread yourselves along the perimeter. Put steel in my warriors' spines. Hold the foe back no matter the cost. Bleed them for me. Zorphus' Chosen slammed their fists against their breastplates, then turned away to fulfill his commands. The sorcerer shot a brief glance up at the roiling sky, muttering a prayer to the dark gods. Then he moved to the head of his acolytes' procession and led the way into the pit. Rezek hauled himself up onto the siding balcony of the ruined factotum. From his vantage point, he inspected the southern defences. Below him stretched a thin line of black armoured warriors, hunkered down amidst the ruins. Havoc sighted their heavy weapons out across the kill zone, watching the rising dust cloud that marked the approaching Imperial forces. Obliterators spat corrupted machine code, flesh metal slithering as they manifested their weapons of choice. Here and there lurked demon engines or Black Legion tanks, all hungered for battle, thought Verzek, or thirsted for loyalist blood. The Chosen's auto-senses dimmed suddenly, adjusting to the first vivid flash of the Black Legion orbital bombardment. A lance beam reached down from the clouds, leaving a vivid, cerulean slash across Verzek's vision. Fire bloomed where it hit the ground, a roiling explosion that drew roars from the Black Legion warriors. "So begins the slaughter!" bellowed Verzek, magnifying his vision to drink in the sight of Blood Angel's tanks reduced to blazing wrecks. The enemies were coming fast, racing armoured transports, speeding bike squadrons, and rumbling tanks. They would soon close the gap. More orbital blasts stabbed downwards, lance beams guided by plummeting barrage bombs that raised great clouds of dust and smoke with each detonation. The ground shook as a rain of fire fell along the horizon, arcing away to the east and west of Verzek's position. There were more enemies out there, he knew. The Imperials were attacking from every side at once. His vox crackled with reports of enemy knights and titans, and maniple upon maniple of the Adeptus Mechanicus cyborgs. Verzek even caught mention of Cranon the Relentless, a report of the surviving Crimson slaughter racing in from the blazing eastern forests with the Legio Metallica on their tails. "Cowardly dogs," muttered Verzek to himself, then louder, addressing his warriors. "Now is the time! Mighty Black Legionaries, servants of the Despoiler, let's show these Imperial runts how real warriors fight!" His followers raised another ferocious bellow of approval. The next moment, bursting from the billowing smokescreen of the bombardment, the Blood Angels came racing into battle. Storm-raving gunships streaked overhead, fire stabbing down from their assault cannons to blitz explosions through the traitor lines. At the same time, those Imperial ground units that had survived the gauntlet of the barrage executed their own armoured charge. There were a lot of them, thought Verzek with grim relish. Missiles streaked up from the Havocs to his left, drawing lines of fire between their position and the racing Storm Ravens. The nearest of the gunships was pierced by multiple warheads exploding in midair. Another banked hard, only to be hit from the side by a roaring Helldrake. The demon engine's talons bit deep, and both aircraft tumbled out of view behind the ruins. The bulk of Verzek's warriors rained fire upon the Blood Angels' tanks and bikers. Muzzle flare flickered up and down the line as a hail of bolts, missiles, and laser blasts engulfed the loyalists. A red armoured rhino exploded, blazing figures scrambling from within. A Land Raider slewed sideways as its track was severed, spooling out in a spray of links and leaving the vehicle stranded. Blood Angels' bikers were punched from their saddles, or had their fuel tanks detonate beneath them. Still, the enemy came on, bellowing the name of Sanguinius, as they spilled from their transports and ran headlong for the traitor line. "Hold them!" roared Verzek, his gold-chased bolter spitting shells down into the charging foe. He spun a blood angel off his feet, blowing their warrior's arm from his shoulder. "Let none pass!" Away to the right, a Black Legion Predator exploded, pierced by multiple lascannon blasts. Its demise shook the balcony on which Verzek stood, staggering him for a moment. When the Chosen looked up, a glorious warrior in sculpted red armor had fought his way almost to the base of the Factorum. A captain, by the look of him, power sword swinging as he hacked through a band of Black Legionaries with his command squad at his back. "Time to die, noble angel," hissed Verzek, slinging his bolter and drawing his own blade. The Chosen took 2 steps back, then made a running leap from the balcony and plunged into the fight. All around the perimeter, the Imperial forces hit hard and fast. The devastating orbital bombardment had slackened as Loyalist battleships executed a courageous attack in orbit. The sky filled with the shooting stars of tumbling wreckage as the Black Legion craft broke off and rose to engage their tormentors. On the ground, the Blood Angels and Adeptus Mechanicus pressed forwards in the shadow of towering Imperial war engines. Black Legion fire continued to rain down upon them, blasting tanks to roiling wreckage and annihilating waves of infantry. As the fighting raged, bloody thunderheads loomed above the western plains, racing swiftly closer. They billowed above Khan and his maelstrom of gore, who rushed back in towards the raging battle. As the betrayer neared the flash and thunder of the war zone, his keen eyes caught movement ahead. Cult Mechanicus forces, electro-priests and servitors retreating in the face of overwhelming Black Legion firepower. Roaring battle cries, Khan and his warriors crashed into the Metallicans from behind, ripping through them like whirlwinds. Desperate, point-blank firefights erupted as warriors of the Cult Mechanicus tried to stave off the enemies hitting them from both sides. Black Legion fire rained indiscriminately into the fight as berserkers slaughtered and electro-priests blasted and slew. Amidst the slaughter, Khan caught sight of a looming figure, the Magus who led this ill-fated procession. Power stabbed from the machine priest's weapons, blasts of focused plasma burning through the chests and helms of 3 berserkers in quick succession. The next moment, Gorchild's whirling teeth lopped the caliver from its mechadendrite mounting, sweeping on to carve deep into the Magus's robed form. Blood and oil spurted, electrical discharges crackled, and the Magus's eye lenses flickered with flaring power. "You cannot kill me," rasped the priest, his voice fuzzed with static. "The Omnisire has not the might of Khorne," interrupted Khan in a furious roar, before lopping off the Magus's head. With one mighty swing, the machine priest's body convulsed, then slumped to the blood-sick ground as his sparkling head rolled into a ditch. There its eye lenses went dark for the last time. Khan neither knew nor would have cared that with a single axe stroke he had denied the Imperium its best chance to acquire the Demon Cage technology. He knew only that another worthy skull lay now at the feet of Khorne, and that he must add more. Roaring to the blood clouds above, the betrayer ploughed on into warzone carnage, hacking through Metallican and Black Legionary alike in his murderous frenzy. To the south, Verzek fought with spite and skill against his Blood Angel opponent. The captain was an expert swordsman, his blade flashing as he cut the air to ring against Verzek's guard time and again. Yet the Chosen could see his foe's crippling nobility. The captain fought with restraint, as though caging his true fury behind bars of iron will. "Your mistake," spat the Chosen, convulsing his mutant third lung to unleash a scream that burst blood vessels all across his body with its force. The howl slammed forward like a hammer blow, knocking the captain from his feet and cracking his armor. Verzek raised his blade with a roar and swept it down upon his dazed opponent. His blow was blocked by the golden sword of another Blood Angel, whose combat shield cracked into Verzek's helm. "Get back, traitor!" roared the Blood Angel, driving Verzek away from the prone captain with a series of swift hacks and cuts. "Your base trickery shall not avail you!" "Oh, it might," snarled the Chosen, opening his jaws and spitting a wad of acid into his enemy's faceplate. Ceramite hissed as it melted. Cursing, the Blood Angel ripped his helm from his head. It was all the opening Versik needed, and his blade stabbed into his enemy's now unarmored face. The molecular field that surrounded the sword parted flesh and bone, and as Versik ripped his weapon free, the Blood Angel collapsed, his head bisected. The Chosen allowed the tides of battle to sweep him back, absorbing the state of the battle. Batters were turning against him. Knots of Black Legionaries still fought, but they were outnumbered by the vengeful Blood Angels overrunning their lines. Ducking back through the hollow Factorum's doorway, he keyed his vox. "This is Versik on the southern perimeter. The foe have broken through. Warpsmith Octarian, send your demon engines." The response, when it came, was set against a backdrop of fierce gunfire and explosions. "They are here too," grated Warpsmith Octarian. "Teleport strike!" The rasping voice cut out for a moment, and Versik's vox spat static. When the Warpsmith voice returned, it was pained and furious. "They are tearing my engines apart. They have reached the pit. We cannot." Versik broke the line with a curse. "I must hold them back," he muttered to himself, mind whirling with strategic possibilities. The next second, a figure darkened the empty doorway, and the Chosen turned to find the glowing muzzle of the Blood Angel's captain's plasma pistol. His foe had found him again. "No, traitor," intoned Captain Aphael. "All you must do is die." Plasma flashed, and Versik's world vanished in white fire. The Doom of Amathal. The Banshee stone screamed, and the world screamed with it. Set into the cracked bedrock at the base of the pit, the crystal pulsed and writhed. Blood welled from the rocky ground and gushed from the earthen walls, flowing from the anointed soil in crimson streams. The Banshee stone drank it in. Suffused with sacrificial might, it howled with this harmonic power. The ground shook. Cracks spread. Beneath the ground, the cacophonous resonance reached the shell of the demon cage and broke its wards one by one. Lord Zorphus threw his arms wide, ears and eyes bleeding from the pandemonic din. A powerful sense of destiny gripped him. This was victory. He knew it. His moment was at hand. "Lord," the hissing voice of the warrior known as the Sorrow cut through his triumph, barely audible in his vox. "Defenses are collapsing to the south and east. Their titans have annihilated our armor. There is nothing more we can do to slow them. The angels will soon breach the pit." "Understood," barked Lord Zorphus, before switching his vox to address the surviving Black Legionaries fighting above. "It is done," he boomed. "You have served the despoiler well. Now, fall back. Let them have this doomed world." With that, Zorphus spun and set out across the shuddering floor of the pit. He moved swiftly, his acolytes and lumbering Terminator bodyguards keeping pace. The traitors dodged around dead servitor excavators and rode out the planet's convulsions, the Banshee stone pulsing ever brighter behind them. Several of Zorphus's entourage were lost as the ground opened to swallow them. Ignoring their fate, the sorcerer and his followers strode onto the earth ramp that wound up the pit's flank. High above, they could see the sky, billowing with bloody storm clouds. With every pace, it grew closer. They were almost at the top of the ramp when the Blood Angels blocked their path. Zorphus saw red-armored Terminators led by a roaring warrior with a bionic eye and an ornate thunderhammer. Behind him came veteran and golden sanguinary guard. Bolters flashed and roared as the Blood Angels and Black Legion opened fire upon one another. Zorphus threw up a warding sigil, conjuring a shield of power from which the enemy fire rebounded. With a contemptuous snarl, the sorcerer drew upon the powers of the warp and tore the ground out from under his enemy's feet. A thumping series of tectonic detonations raced up the ramp, hurling several angels into the pit. Zorphus was not done. Roaring with triumphant fury, the sorcerer channeled the rampant energies of the Banshee stone itself, stealing a portion of its hideous disharmony. The power leapt out as bolts of crackling black lightning and ripped a massive chunk of rock from the pit wall. The Blood Angels staggered as the avalanche slammed down on them, burying many in rubble. Those who could still do so continued to fire, punching several more Black Legionaries from their feet. "Forwards!" snarled Zorphus, leading his warriors up the ramp and through the midst of their half-buried foes. He wove aside from the furious swipe of a chain fist, noting with alarm that the enemy Terminators were already ripping themselves free. More Blood Angels were closing in from the south, and off to the east, Loyalist Titans loomed. "Stygian beast!" he voxed. "Do you have teleporter lock?" "Aye, Lord," crackled the response from on high. "Your sigils and wards are holding. The machine spirits have your blood scent, and that of the betrayer." For a single slow second, Lord Zorphus watched the ornate thunderhammer of the Blood Angel's leader sweeping towards his face, ploughing through the gathering energies of a teleport flare. Then, with a hollow bang, Zorphus and his followers vanished from the surface of Amathal, snatched away by a teleportarium modified by spells of Zorphus's own cunning creation. Kharn fought amidst a crimson haze. Victims swam into focus, then gone again as his axe took their lives. He hewed down the sons of Sanguinius and Horus alike, claiming their skulls and spilling their blood for the only master who truly mattered. The betrayer leapt aside as a land raider roared past, its spiked ram stirring a memory of an ancient wounding, terrible agony in his chest. Kharn shook the memory off and plunged into a mass of Skitarii, hewing them like firewood. As the last of the cyborgs fell, Kharn registered dropcraft dusting off around him, lumbering into the skies with their guns blazing. Weaklings, he thought. Fleeing before the butchery was done, he and his berserkers would not display such cowardice. Yet, even as he formed that thought, the betrayer saw wisps of ethereal energy twining about his limbs. His runes of Khorne blazed, overwhelmed by sorcerous powers. What? Colors whirled, gravity surged and vanished. The ensorcelled teleport plucked Karl from Amathal and dumped him unceremoniously into the armored hold of a spaceship. Kharn's senses reeled from the sudden transition, the energies of the warp leaving his thoughts momentarily sluggish and confused. He took in voices, dark magi hissing that they had followed the orders of the despoiler himself, that Kharn had been saved from certain and wasteful death through Lord Zorphus's vile sorcerer's ritual, that he should be grateful to be singled out for rescue when so many had been left to die. Their prating needled his mind like the butcher's nails, and Kharn felt his fury rising. He had been snatched from glorious battle, had been forced to leave the faithful of Khorne to their holy end, as if he were some slave of Abaddon's to be borne away at will. Gorchild revved in Kharn's fist, and the Magi had just enough time to shriek in panic before he came for their heads. Elsewhere, amidst the madness of war-zone carnage, Crannon swang his monstrous blade, cleaving a Blood Angel in two. The bloodied halves of his foe flopped to the floor, and Crannon leapt over them. To his left, Drasnik and the last of the Ravagers hacked and tore, cursed and blasted. To his right, the Hellbrute Hakorath led the ragtag remains of Crannon's Terminators and Chaos Space Marines across the rubble, guns roaring. The last of the Warband's tanks lay blazing somewhere in their wake, reduced to scrap by the guns of the Imperial Titans. But the Crimson Slaughter would get off this hellish world alive. They would return to the lost hope and rebuild. Crannon was utterly determined. The war zone was total bedlam, with traitors and loyalist armies tangled together and fighting with wild fury. Tanks roared through walls and blazed point-blank fire into masses of enemy warriors, only to be blown apart by their foes in return. Khorne berserkers were attacking everything in sight, wreaking indiscriminate carnage. The knots of cultists screamed out prayers to the dark gods as they were surrounded and gunned down by the vengeful loyalists. Over the madness came a soaring wail, raising from the pit nearby and causing the ground to shudder and crack in time with its nerve-shredding screams. All around, Black Legionaries were staging fighting retreats towards their last remaining transports. It was towards the nearest of these that Crannon now drove, cutting down anything that got in his way. "The Amathal voices," snarled Drasnik. "They're getting louder again. It's this damn place." "You're right," growled Crannon. watching as emerald flames began to crawl along his limbs. But it's different now. He grunted in exertion as he lopped the head from a Black Legion warrior who had lunged into his path. Before they wanted us, needed us as vessels for their will. Now it's just overspill. Whatever Zorphus has done, he's brought the demons so close to the surface that they don't need us anymore. They'll be free soon enough. Ahead, Black Legionaries were piling aboard a traitor Thunderhawk, the aircraft's guns blazing as they staved off the Skitarii, closing in from both sides. That, snarled Crannon, raising his blade, is ours. The leader of the Crimson Slaughter led the charge, pounding headlong towards the ramp. The handful of Black Legionaries turned on the boarding ramp, and the guns came up without a second's hesitation. Several bolt rounds slammed against Crannon's armor as he charged, and more than one of the Crimson Slaughter fell to Black Legion gunfire. Then the Chaos Lord was up the ramp and into his foes, the Ravagers close on his heels. Powered blades and crackling maces swung, armor crumpled and bones shattered. Bolters boomed in the confined hold, blowing red-armored warriors back down the ramp like rag dolls. Still, the Crimson Slaughter processed forwards, hacking and hewing at the frantic Black Legion, backing them into the Thunderhawk's hold and massacring them like cornered rats. The last fighting ended when Hakareth lumbered aboard. A single desperate Black Legionary made a dash for the ramp, but the Hellbrute caught him around the head with its massive fist and crushed his skull like an egg. Crannon looked around. Barely 15 warriors were left standing from a force of several hundred, without counting the thousands of cultists slain. He had lost a lot of warriors on this world. It would take time to rebuild, and once he did, Lord Zorphus would have a great deal to answer for. But that was another day. For now, they just had to live. "Gaznicht," he growled. "Take 2 of your men and persuade the pilots that we are leaving now." The champion nodded his horned helm, then disappeared towards the cockpit with a pair of the Ravagers at his heels. Meanwhile, the surviving Crimson Slaughter warriors drew up at the top of the ramp and coldly gunned down anything that moved into their field of fire. A few moments later, the assault ramp rose with a welcome whine of servos, sealing the Crimson Slaughter inside. Crannon felt the crass engines engage. Then the Thunderhawk was rising, turning, and leaping forwards as Jasnick hit the jets hard. Crannon hung on to a hand grip as the Thunderhawk burned for the upper atmosphere with enemy fire ringing from its hull. As they rose away from war-zone carnage, he felt the pressure of the exalted demons' voices easing in his mind, until at last they vanished altogether. Blessed silence fell, and the Lord of the Crimson Slaughter released a slow breath before wrenching off his helm and barking a weary laugh. The voices would return. Of that he had no doubt. Not those of Amathal, but of the twisted entities that had haunted the Crimson Slaughter for so long. But for now, Crannon's mind was his own, and while he could think, he was getting his followers out of here. "Scimitar!" foxed Crannon. "Lock our Terminators, teleport homers, and move to rendezvous. We're in a stolen Thunderhawk. Vorlak, don't shoot us down. Have the other craft muster on you, and be ready to fight if you have to. I don't care what the mighty Abaddon commands. We are done with this place, and we are leaving." The fire was huge. A roaring conjunction of yellow flame that danced upon a bed of blackened wraithbone. It filled the echoing warp chamber with diseased illumination, and threw twisted shadows that cavorted across the walls and ceiling. Abaddon stood before the demon pyre, brows drawn down as he watched the images swimming within its depths. He watched as the Daemor system burned, as Eyeline fell. He watched the ebb and flow of battle across Amathal's surface. Victorious champions swam into sight, roaring battle cries, only to be replaced moments later by the ash and bones of the slain. Abaddon watched it all play out, a tale of angels and traitors told in the fires of the warp itself. Finally, he saw the Banshee stone, shuddering and screaming in cacophonous fury until, at last, the librarians of the Blood Angel shattered it with the power of their minds. "Too late," hissed a ghostly voice in his ears. They were too late to stop it. Then it is only a matter of time, rumbled Abaddon, his deep voice echoing across the twisted chamber. Yeah, came the whispers. The ritual is complete. The cracks are spreading, and the wards are dying. You have done well, Lord Zorphus, murmured Abaddon. The frames crackled and jumped. Shadows danced and whirled. Then the whispers came again. We have hidden ourselves from loyalist eyes amidst the zircon sprawl. We continue the rites after the stone began. The cracks widen. We watch. We wait. Abaddon nodded to himself, a slow gesture of satisfaction. Do so, he replied. Complete this task, and upon my return, you shall have such rewards as loyal service brings. Abaddon turned away as the pyre died back and strode to the armor-glass viewport set into the chamber's outer wall. He looked out from one of the planet killer's many baroque spires towards the approaching fringe of the Eye of Terror. Real space blurred with the outspilled corruption of the warp, creating great clouds and flickering borealis of kaleidoscopic energies that Abaddon's flagship dived into without pause. This was but the fringe, thought the despoiler. Just a leading edge of the twisted realm within which he had forged his vast armada.
He came back.
Now, he must go deeper than ever before, leaving his lackeys to win his battles, while he grasped the power to win the entire war. That power would be his, thought the despoiler, unconsciously clenching his fists. He had fought too long and too hard for it to be otherwise.
Check out Bradley if you don't know who he is.
No other outcome. At last, the hour of victory.
You want to go finish? He pulls right back. Nah, I'm pro streamer. Fuck off.
Would burn upon his broken throne.
That was a fucking beautiful moment.
Abaddon plunged deeper into the Eye of Terror and left the savage battles of the 13th Black Crusade blazing on in his wake. Breaking the cage. The final battle for the Diamore system would be fought around the blood-anointed environs of Warzone Carnage. It was only one of the savage conflicts raging throughout the system, but the others were mere distractions. Lord Zorphus had eyes for this battle alone. Here lay the despoiler's prize, and the Black Legion threw everything they had into claiming it. In the wake of the attack by Khan's Butcher Horde, Lord Zorphus met with his first true setback. Every action changes the weave of fate. Unlike the skilled seers of the Eldar, those chaos worshippers who predict the future do so by interpreting the whispered half-truths of demons. Around Amethal, the screams and threats, beguilements and imprecations of the caged demons filled the ether. Under such conditions, even the most skilled oracle could discern nothing of fate. Zorphus's third eye was blinded, and though he had laid his plans as best he could, the Blood Angels diverged from the path he had set. Led by First Captain Carlane, an elite force of Blood Angels veterans and Sanguinary Guard had launched a blistering strike against the Hex Infernium that fed Eyeline's demon engine factories. It was an audacious move. Fierce fighting had raged through the streets around the Hex Infernium, the Blood Angels' element of surprise carrying them only so far before the overwhelming numbers of the Chaos Forces began to tell. Yet just as a rampaging Lord of Skulls looked set to crush the attackers, the Sanguinor struck from the heavens. Inspired by the Angel of Sanguinius, the surviving Blood Angels succeeded in destroying one of the biochemical warding towers that stopped the energies of the rift from rampaging out of control. Mayhem ensued as the demonic maelstrom broke its bounds and devoured the factories it was meant to feed. Carlane and his raiders escaped aboard Stormraven gunships, even as the Hex Infernium detonated into a roiling wave of warp energies that annihilated all life on the planet. The loss of Arline was a major blow for the Black Legion. Lord Zorphus's ritual teetered upon the brink of completion. To fail now would invite hideous consequences. He had hoped to shed more blood upon the thirsty soil, but the Blood Angels had forced his hand. At the head of the Black Legion invasion fleet, the sorcerer led the final attack on Amethal. The Black Legion fleet was not vast, certainly not large enough to bolster all of the faltering traitor battlements on Amathal. Imperial Strategos had concluded that either their enemy was hesitantly frittering his forces away piecemeal, or the heretics were playing some other game, the rules to which the Imperial forces were not privy. It was this second scenario that filled Lord Admiral Gordas with dread, and led him to order all remaining ships and planetary defense levies on Tormalid to stand ready. Wherever the Black Legion struck, Gordas would throw the last of his might into helping his allies stop them. Gordas's devotion was admirable, but Lord Zorphus's cunning and prescience would be the governor's undoing. It began over Peridos. The Black Legion cruisers emerged from hiding, surging from the Zircon sprawl in an all-out attack against the Imperial naval cordon. It would be a desperate battle for the outnumbered traitors, but one in which they might win great glory. More importantly, from Zorphus's point of view, it would ensure that no reinforcements were available to defend Amathal. Meanwhile, a lone traitor battleship settled in the void just outside the range of Tormalid's orbital guns. This was the Cagademon, craft of the word-bearer Gorath Hell. The Dark Apostle had business with the capital world and its vital dockyards. He would ensure that no aid for Amathal came from that quarter. With the board set, Lord Zorphus moved all of his pieces in for the final blow. His fleet thundered down upon Amathal, gathering up the scattered remnants of the Crimson Slaughter and Cornate warships as it went. The Blood Angels and Fleet Mechanicus flotilla fought bravely to hold back the tide, but they faced a fleet fresh and undamaged by the fighting thus far. After the strike cruiser Flame of Baal was torn in half by sustained torpedo bombardment, and 2 Mechanicum explorator ships were reduced to drifting wreckage, the remaining Imperial craft fell back. With the skies clear, the Chaos Planetfall began. Their objective was the gate of the primordial demon cage. Thanks to the Crimson Slaughter, Lord Zorphus knew where the cage's wards were weakest and where its inmates' power could leak out.
Very good.
The Black Legion brought with them a mighty weapon, a disharmonic crystal torn from the throne of a Slaaneshi demon prince who had foolishly thought to oppose Abaddon. Known as the Banshee Stone, this monstrous artifact would form the focus of a ritual to shatter the bars of the demon cage. Every drop of blood shed around Warzone carnage, every day of seemingly senseless and wasteful battle, had served to prepare the way for this dread weapon. It had been sacrificial magic on a global scale, and Lord Zorphus held the knife. The ground had been anointed, the way prepared. Drinking deep the blood of the slain, the Banshee Stone would unleash its discordant fury to burn out the wards of the demon cage where they were weakest. The vast prison would crack wide open, and billions of warp entities would be set loose all at once. Such an incredible surge of empiric energy would be more than reality could bear. The Diamor system would pull open like a hideous wound, causing a new-formed warp rift to billow forth in its place. Abaddon's crimson path would leap suddenly forwards, a fault line in reality ripping from Cadia to Diamor, and on towards Terra. It was a diabolical masterstroke, and one that, if successful, would hasten Abaddon's war by months, perhaps even years. Shield of Baal. Welcome, gentle listener. I am Voldemort, your faithful servant, and I wish to introduce you to the factions, faces, and events of the Warhammer 40k setting. The grim darkness of the far future, where there is no time for peace. There is only time for war. And today, we shall be hearing the first part of one of the most important events in recent memory, the beginning of the assault on the Blood Angels by High Fleet Leviathan. A second part will be coming pretty soon. If you enjoy these presentations, then hit the like button, possibly subscribe, and if you do, hit notifications, as I would not want you to miss out. And if you are feeling exceptionally generous and want these kind of things to continue, then do consider also joining our Patreon. links in the description. Now, let us hear of the Shield Worlds, the Tyranids, the Blood Angels and their successors, and a very unlikely alliance of convenience. To quote, Shield of Baal, Exterminatus, the Rising Leviathan. The Shield Worlds. The Cryptus system was a bastion of the Imperium, and its worlds were ramparts that faced the void with bristling guns and high walls. Each of its 4 principal planets, Asphodex, Lysios, Eros, and Tartaros, toiled for the glory of the Emperor under the twin suns of their system, known as the Eyes of Cryptus. The Imperial citizens were secure in the power of their sprawling defenses and brave soldiers. For millennia, these worlds had stood inviolate against the darkness, bathed in the baleful red light of their suns, a shield against the enemies of mankind. When the first sub-tendrils of High Fleet Leviathan reached out towards the twin suns of Cryptus, the Imperium remained confident that the system's heavily defended worlds, vast planetary defense forces, and powerful battle fleet would hold the Xenos back. Even so, Astra Militarum regiments were rushed to reinforce the system, and the veteran Cadian general Drost took command of the defense. The Imperial Guard dug in on the city world of Asphodex, garrisoned the void domes of Tartaros, sent air wings to the gas giant Eros, and deployed armored formations to the toxic moon of Ixoi. Upon the ruined world of Lysios, Canoness Magda Grace's Adepta Sororitas set to defending the nomadic tribes. However, these planet-bound defenses were merely a precaution in the eyes of the Imperium, as the system's greatest barrier was out amongst the stars. Beyond the Cryptus battle fleet and its vast array of void ships, an asteroid field ringed the twin stars. Known as the Castellan Belt, this ancient field of mined-out asteroids was now a gun line of fortified planetoids, millions of turrets and macro cannon pointing out into the darkness of space. And yet, this was not the greatest of the system's defenses. One more barrier lurked on the very edge of the open void, the Aegis Diamando. This was a wall of unnatural cold that was anathema to all life. It was believed that the Tyranids could not hope to cross the Aegis and survive. The nightmare begins. As has oft happened in the Imperium's long and bloody history, it had underestimated its foes. The High Fleet sailed straight through the Aegis, encasing itself in vile secretions that quickly froze into diamond-hard armor. This shield not only protected the Tyranids from their unnatural cold, but also proof against the Imperial battleship's massed guns. Numbering millions of bioships and lesser organisms, the alien tendril divided as it sailed in system, heading to each of the inhabited worlds. The Imperial ships were brushed aside, overwhelmed by an enemy that outnumbered them many times over. The battle amongst the stars was lost in a span of hours. The rest of the system's defenders forced to watch, powerless, from their planetary fortifications as the Tyranids consumed the Imperial fleet and moved in for the kill. Then the invasion began in earnest, and every planet of Cryptus felt the talons of the Devourer. In the jaws of the beast. On Asphodex, General Drost led an inspired defense that denied the Tyranids the skies while channeling them into kill zones on the ground. On Lysios, Canoness Magda Grace rallied the nomadic tribes and their caravans into a great corral as the first Xenos swarms fell upon them. In the swirling blue skies of Eros, Astra Militarum Valkyrie wings patrolled the upper atmosphere, fighting off the worst the Tyranids could throw at them. Meanwhile, on the moon of Ixoi, the Vostroyan tank regiments fought a bitter battle in the poison mists against hordes of Xeno invaders. And on Tartaros, Imperial guardsmen struggled to defend the void domes from the hulking monsters sent against them. Everywhere battle raged unchecked, and on every planet the skies were filled with falling spores and screaming alien horrors. At first, it seemed like the Imperium might emerge victorious, and great victories were reported on both Asphodex and Lysios, as Astra Militarum and Adepta Sororitas took a heavy toll upon the invaders. The ruins of Phodia, Asphodex's principal city, and the plains of Lysios were both thick with alien dead. But these successes were brought with the lives of countless brave Imperial defenders. These early victories would prove only false hope. Only after the first day of fighting did the true size of the Tyranid invasion fleet become clear, as wave after wave of bio-creatures rained down from the skies to take the place of the millions already slain. Worse still, the hive mind was adapting at a terrifying rate, and for every tried and tested tactic the Imperium had discovered to defeat the Tyranids, the hive mind had developed a defense. What little hope there had been died at the sight of the stars blotted out by hive ships, and the worlds of the Cryptus system seething with Xenos invaders. On Asphodex, the great city burned out of control, and General Dost's defenses were overrun. Attacked from within and without, his armies crumbled, and soon the Imperial Guard's carefully laid lines of defense had become isolated pockets of resistance that were devoured one by one. In the chaos of battle, Dost disappeared, and all organized resistance began to break down. On Lysios, Magda Grace's inspired defense became a desperate last stand. The Canoness held her army together until she was eventually slain by a lictor in the final moments of the evacuation. Though many of her sisters escaped, many more perished in the final retreat. Eros, Tartros, and Ixoi all suffered similar defeats, the defenders broken and scattered before the alien swarms. As the second day drew to a close, the shield worlds had been all but broken, and the Cryptus system completely overrun by the Hive fleet. Only a faint cry for help escaped out into the warp, to be heard beyond the Aegis Diamondo. Blade of Sanguinius. Commander Dante had suspected from the first that the Cryptian shield would fall. As a result, he had a sizable force assembled and ready when the distress call from Cryptus was received. Within days, a spearhead of Blood Angels and Flesh Tearers reached the Cryptus system, determined to wrest the Emperor's worlds from the grip of the Hive Mind. Cryptus burns. The Blade of Vengeance shuddered as it slipped back into real space, leaving the turbulence of the warp behind. In the wake of the massive Blood Angels battle barge, scores of smaller craft materialized in bursts of swirling crimson fire, as they too were disgorged along the extreme edge of the Cryptus system. Upon the command deck of the Blade, Commander Dante stood, a golden god in shining sculpted ceramite. The journey through the warp had been nightmarish. Throughout the Space Marine fleet, navigators and astropaths lay dying in their dozens. It was a steep price to breach the psychic miasma thrown up by the Tyranid Hive fleet, but one Dante was willing to pay if there was a chance Cryptus or its peoples could be saved. A reedy astropathic wail still lingered in the Immaterium. It was this haunting cry for help that the fleet had followed to reach the besieged system. Yet the message gave no clue as to the dispositions of those still fighting, if indeed any still fought at all. As the Blood Angels and Flesh Tearers fleets assembled, their escorts and scout ships ranged ahead, picked thieves and vox echoes scrounging the void for data. According to system-wide auger capture, the tendril of Hive Fleet Leviathan had breached the outer system only 5 days ago, and made planetfall upon all major worlds 24 standard hours later. From this information, Dante had hoped to find Imperial resistance still strong and resilient. What greeted his long-range scans was just the opposite. Descending to the massive hololith projector central to the Blade's Tactica Arcanium, Dante considered the ghostly images taking shape within its swirling lens. At his side were Captain Carlane of the Archangels and Chief Librarian Mephiston. The two chapter heroes gave counsel, pointing out variations in the ebb and flow of data shadows. the worlds of Kryptos drifted above the hololith, circling the baleful crimson orbs of the system's twin stars. Tartaros hung closest to the stars, then Asphyrex, followed by Lysios with its massive moon, Ixoi, and then the gas giant Eros, until around the edges of the system, a vast tumbling asteroid belt hung. Beyond this was an indistinct world and another solar barrier, this one glittering softly in the dark. But it was not to the edges of the system that Dante's gaze drifted. His attention was fixed upon the four innermost worlds and the putrid stain upon the stars that enveloped them. It was a hive fleet of almost unimaginable size, easily over 1 million void-faring organisms, and who knew how many trillion weapon beasts already spewed forth onto the Krypton planet. However, of more concern than the size of the Tyranid armada, or that it choked the skies above every world, was the complete lack of Vox traffic. Even with the disturbing interference caused by such a large concentration of the hive mind, Dante would have expected to detect at least some Vox signals from the defenders. Could the system have fallen completely in just 3 days? Certainly, the proximity of the largest bioships to the planets seemed to suggest the Leviathan had already begun to feed, gorging itself upon the vast wealth of biomatter the Kryptos system offered. Then another icon flickered into being on the hololith, and Dante observed a ragged line of ships making for the far side of the system, an evacuation fleet. Judging from its size, however, it could hold no more than 1/10 of the population of Kryptos. As he watched, he could see the tendrils of the Tyranid swarm following them out. Doubtless most of the vessels lacked warp drives. Those that did had probably abandoned their comrades long ago. And so, the evacuees were making for open space, though the commander could not see what good it would do them, and without aid there was little hope they would make it. Any lesser general of the Imperium would have looked upon the doom of the Kryptos system unfolding before them, and regretfully turned their fleet back to the void, confident that there was nothing they could do to change its fate. For Dante, though, this thought never crossed his mind. Around the edges of the ghostly image of the Kryptos system hovered hundreds of star systems, and amongst these, one in particular drew Dante's eye. Baal. The glimmering red jewel was a sister system to Kryptos, its closest neighbor, and directly in the path of the cryptoid tendril. When the beast had devoured the worlds here, the Baal system would be next, and with it, the Blood Angel's homeworld. This Commander Dante would not allow. The Crimson Spear. Lit by the guttering lumen sconces of the Tactica Arcanium, Commander Dante gathered his captains and advisors to formulate a plan of attack. The chapter master assessed that the greatest strength of the Hive fleet had fallen upon Asphyrex and Lysios. As such, it was to these worlds that the bulk of the Space Marine fleet were dispatched. The world of Tartaros now appeared to hold little value. Its unique solar array had, via relay satellites, provided power for the entire system. Now, however, long-range scans showed its surface devoid of human life. Wreathed in killing fog, Ixoi would also be ignored. Eros, however, still showed weak traces of resistance, and so a small contingent would be sent there. The Blood Angels' first company, known as the Archangels, and comprised largely of Terminators, would be for the most part held in reserve. The exception was a small task force of Battle Brothers who, under the leadership of First Captain Carlane, would teleport onto Asphyrex as the tip of the spear. They had a mission of their own to complete, given them by Corbulo himself. In their wake, a demi-company of the Blooded, the Blood Angels' second company, would make their landing and link up with any surviving Imperial units. Meanwhile, in orbit, the Blade of Vengeance and half the Blood Angels' fleet would support them. This was a war zone that Dante would take charge of personally. With billions of citizens, it held the greatest concentration of biomass in the entire system, and had attracted a commensurately vast swarm. Eros would be assigned to the rest of the second company, commanded by Captain Aphael, and supported by the bulk of the remaining Blood Angels' vessels. Their job would be to locate any survivors from amongst the drifting mine platforms and clear the atmosphere of the gas giant for any evacuation attempts. Corbulo would accompany Aphael upon his assault. The sanguinary high priest had received intelligence that suggested that the system's last stockpiles of Satrix elixir lay somewhere below Eros's swirling clouds. Corbulo meant to claim that prize, if he could. The liberation of Lysios would fall to the Flesh Terrors and their fleet. Dante charged their chapter master, Gabriel Seth, with clearing a landing zone and looking for survivors. Seth offered his assurances that Lysios would be taken, and the Blood Angels' chapter master had faith that the Flesh Terrors would complete their mission, despite the chapter's dire reputation. Though there was a savagery to the Flesh Terrors, there was a nobility also. They were, after all, still the scions of Sanguinius. Contemplating the ghostly icons lurking on the far side of the system, Dante dispatched a handful of strike cruisers to rescue any survivors from the Cryptus evacuation fleet. This perilous mission would fall to Captain Phaeton, and would require slipping through the swarm-choked void. However, if there was a chance to save the lives of those on board the fleeing ships, then Dante would take it. These dispositions decided, the Blood Angels chapter master divided his supporting armor as he saw fit. This amounted to a significant force of tanks and dreadnoughts. Thus, each prong of the Blood Angels' attack upon the Cryptus system would be well supported by versatile heavy armor. Like the glowing points of a flaming trident, the Space Marine fleet thrust into the system, the glittering edges of the Aegis Diamondo reaching out to meet it. The fleet had been repelled by the psychic force of the hive mind, as the shadow in the warp enveloped the Cryptus system like a vast dark stain upon the immaterium. Even the sacrifice of many of their navigators had not been enough to bring them close enough to the stars to bypass the barrier. Now they were forced to sail through it. However, where the Tyranids had relied on their strange biology to survive the killing field, the Blood Angels had other means. Ancient star charts showed the thermal tunnels through the ages. It was to these routes that Dante redirected his helmsman, the fleet aiming for invisible corridors through the void. Even so, the tunnels were still impossibly cold, and Dante ordered all hands to retire to their stasis sarcophagi and void vaults. Many chapter serfs perished in the crossing, the cold stretching invisible fingers into their void vaults and stealing away their lives. Yet enough survived to ensure the Blood Angels' fleet would remain at combat efficiency. Within their gleaming golden coffins, the Blood Angels and Flesh Terrors felt nothing of the killing cold. Those Tyranid bioships close to the system's edge watched the Space Marines' armada approach, myriad insectile eyes sweeping to track the newcomers. Strange spines and proboscis waved, probing for signs of life. They detected none within the cold metal shapes that fell towards them through the void. Sensing no immediate threat, the monsters turned their attention back to the Feast of Worlds. The three arms of the Space Marine fleet drifted in system towards the core worlds. As they neared their destination, shipboard systems flickered to life, and hundreds of coffins quickly hissed open. As one, the Blood Angels and Flesh Terrors rose from their slumber and went to war. Fire and blood. Commander Dante and Chief Librarian Mephiston led the assault upon Asphodex. In the sprawling ruins of Phodia, a single spaceport remained in Imperial hands, the rest of the world-covering city given over almost completely to the Tyranids. Like the spear of Sanguinius, the Blood Angels descended upon the port and plunged into the heart of the alien horde. Prometheum Dawn. The hangar deck of the Blade of Vengeance rang to the sound of hundreds of ceramite boots as the Blood Angels prepared to descend upon Phodia, the principal city of Asphodex. Resplendent in his golden armor and flanked by a majestic phalanx of sanguinary guard, Commander Dante surveyed his companies preparing for war. Squads of battle brothers clad in crimson armor were strapping themselves into drop pods, while others thundered up the ramps of their Thunderhawk and Stormraven assault craft. On one side of the vast hangar, lines of Blood Angels knelt in prayer before a chaplain, their armor painted black to acknowledge their place within the Death Company. Predators, rhinos, and land raiders were being loaded onto huge orbital dropships, while tech marines and clutches of servitors blessed their machine spirits. Beyond the massing Space Marine strike force, the graceful glowing arc of Asphyrex loomed large through the shimmering void shields of the battle barge. Its darkened clouds were stained a vile purple by Tyranid spores, and even from this extreme range, Dante could see shoals of bio-creatures as they swam through its murky upper atmosphere. Taking his place aboard the Storm Raven's Spear of Baal, the chapter master gave the order for the attack to commence. Like a bolt of crimson lightning, the Blood Angels crashed down through the upper atmosphere of Asphyrex. All around them, the void and sky burned as the guns of the Space Marine fleet cleared the way. Gargantuan lance turrets cast bolts of searing light across the vacuum, each beam vaporizing thousands of Tyranid bio-beasts and bursting apart bloated living vessels. Salvos of melter missiles and frag bombs streaked down ahead of the Space Marines, erupting amongst the ruined city below in showers of twisted steel and mangled alien flesh. As the Spear of Baal broke through the upper clouds, it was pelted with frigid rain and tiny spores that writhed and slithered across the Storm Raven's canopy. Dante cast his gaze across the night-cloaked city below, glimpsing fires raging out of control through its ruined streets and the flashes of explosions as the orbital barrage cleared a landing zone. Free of the Xenos-shrouded ionosphere, Vox transmissions began to filter in, static garbled pleas for help or cries of despair drifting up from the city's defenders. Gesturing to his pilot, Dante directed the Storm Raven towards the strongest of these signals. Rising up over the horizon, Port Hellas came into view, the largest of Fodia's many spaceports, and the last one still in Imperial hands. As the Spear of Baal roared over the city, Dante saw why the port had held out for so long. The defenders had built a ring of barricades between the port and the city, and then flooded the streets between them with millions of gallons of promethium. The wall of flame from this moat of liquid fuel rose almost 100 yards into the sky. For a moment, Dante wondered why the defenders had not made their own escape. But as his transport banked sharply over the port, he could see its landing pads stood empty. The last shuttles must have fled into orbit long ago. Despite the formidable barrier erected by the Fodians, the alien swarm was massing on all sides, and as the commander watched, he could see places where the flames burned lower than others. It would only be a matter of time before a breach was made, and then Port Hellas would fall. Dante stepped onto the edge of the Storm Raven's assault ramp, his sanguinary guard wordlessly forming up behind him. As the seals broke and the portal yawned open, rain and smoke washed into the transport, accompanied by the sharp smell of burning promethium and the vile alien stench of the Tyranids. Without another word, Dante took 2 long strides and hurled himself out into space. At his back, a wing of golden-armored Blood Angels followed, and scores more leapt from the Thunderhawks and Storm Ravens, holding tight formation behind the Spear of Baal. Far below, the feeder beasts and weapon creatures of the swarm craned their heads upwards, alien eyes reflecting the angelic host as it descended on glowing jump packs. As they watched, the Blood Angel's shining armor caught the first ray of the weak Fodian dawn. Fodia in flames. Fodia is the continent-spanning city of Asphyrex. It comprises thousands of districts and prefectures, together covering tens of thousands of miles of towering cathedrals, squat hab blocks, and sprawling manufactorums. Before the coming of High Fleet Leviathan, Fodia was home to billions of citizens who toiled endlessly under its polluted clouds, fearful of the retribution of both powerful crime lords and their heathen god. When the shadow of the great devourer fell upon Fodia, the city was transformed into a fortress to repel the invaders. Cadian forces under the command of General Drost sealed off streets and fashioned defense emplacements. It was not to be enough. Within 2 days of fighting, the city was devastated and the Cadian lines broken. The few survivors sealing themselves behind plasteel bulkheads or deep underground as they waited for the end. Now Fodia is a nightmare of ruins and alien bioarchitecture. The Hive Fleet has begun the consumption of asphyrex, feeding upon the mass of biomatter now littering its war-torn streets. Spore chimneys and digestion pools dot the landscape, while from high above, hive ships descend to feed from capillary towers. If the Tyranids are not defeated, asphyrex will soon be stripped clean, even its once thick atmosphere consumed by the Hive Fleet, leaving only ruins to mark that the world ever belonged to mankind. Bloody sways. Lit by the blaze of the Promethean moat and the early dawn, the Blood Angels charged into battle. Dante was first upon the ground, his headlong assault taking him into the heart of the swarm that milled before the mighty, fire-lit gates of Port Hellas. Though Hormagaunts and Termagants pressed in from all sides, the Sanguinary Guard carved a path deep into the Tyranid lines, Dante at their tip. Seeing the size and ferocity of the Tyranid swarms now pouring from the ruined city, Dante abandoned his initial plan to link up with the defenders inside the port. Instead, he directed his battle brothers to defend the spaceport's southern gates, where the Tyranid swarms were thickest and the flames were burning low. At the base of the vast fuel sluice that ran down from the port into the moat, the forward elements of Dante's demi-company came crashing down. Drop pods hammered into the earth, crimson-armored warriors pouring out to secure a landing zone for those that came after. Meanwhile, the air howled and screamed as squadrons of Space Marine aircraft engaged swooping broods of winged beasts. Almost at once, the hive mind responded to the Blood Angels' assault, and the swarm, which had moments before been focused upon the port, shifted to assail the Space Marines. Leaping, scrambling lines of aliens converged upon the Blood Angels, larger weapon beasts and Tyranid warriors hurling living rounds from afar as smaller bio-horrors charged across the broken ground. Adding to the mayhem, spores began to rain down from the sky. These burst above and amongst the Blood Angels, covering them with caustic fluids and chitinous shrapnel. In response, the Lord of the Blood Angels called in his own fire support, and Devastator sent salvos of fire crashing into the alien lines. Dante waded through the broods before him, Dax Mortalis becoming ever more fouled with alien gore as the chapter master sought out those bioforms he knew to be leader beasts. Following his movements, the Sanguinary Guard covered his flanks, their glaives crackling with energy as they carved through carapace and talon. Stepping under the sweep of a pair of bone-like blades, Dante hewed the head from a Tyranid warrior before turning in a single motion to hack the legs out from under another. Dozens of smaller beasts snapped and clawed at the chapter master, but his armor turned their blows. Whenever a large creature loomed close, the commander raised his Inferno pistol, blasting it back in a gout of superheated ichor. Gradually, the swarm was breaking upon his host of golden warriors, and they began to clear a perimeter before the gates of the port. One by one, the angels were thinning out the ranks of the Tyranid leadership, and with them, the power of the hive mind waned upon the battlefield. Disordered knots of gaunts, without a powerful consciousness to guide them, were easily led into the Blood Angels' kill zones, or driven back into the city. The sergeants of the Blooded ordered their squads to advance upon the weakened alien army. Patterns of interlocking bolter fire pulverized the nearest foes, mass reactive shells bursting the Xenos apart in great blooms of gore. As the tactical squads cleared the line between port and city, they came under fire from dug-in Tyranid organisms which seemed more like fortifications than living forms. At first, the heavy bioweapons of the Sporocysts slowed the Space Marine advance, crystalline shells and writhing barbed bombs bursting amongst their lines. Then Dante ordered forward his assault squads, the Space Marines bounding over the alien defenses on jump packs to plant crack grenades amongst spore-breathing vents. With a series of wet thumps, several of the spores came apart, spilling out a tide of vile liquid and torn, misshapen flesh. In moments, the Blood Angels were pushing through the Tyranid defensive lines, flamers and melter guns burning away any alien survivors. In the space of less than an hour, Dante's host had driven off the swarms around the port and secured its gates and fuel conveyors. Now the Blood Angels could begin to ferry down support personnel and heavy armor, while looking to the evacuation of whatever Imperial refugees remained. Psychic Storm. After the success of the Blood Angels' initial assault, even Dante was surprised at the speed with which the hive mind struck back. In the span of but a few minutes, the swarm was regrouping within the ruins, and a new and terrible psychic presence stalked amongst them. Mephiston was the first to feel it, his keen esoteric senses detecting the approaching shadow within the background storm of alien whispers. Acknowledging his warning, Dante pulled the Blood Angels back towards the port's fortified southern gate, ordering them to dig in and make ready. Moments later, a hulking trio of Malaceptors lumbered out of the ruins, surrounded by shoals of floating psycho beasts. The air around these Tyranids hummed and shimmered, and no battle brother that looked upon them could deny the terrible presence of the hive mind walking amongst them. In the wake of the alien psychers came fresh waves of scuttling creatures, reinvigorated and spurred on by the iron will of the psycho beasts. Dante ordered all fire concentrated upon the hulking psychic horrors, and a storm of shells, bolts and blasts rained down upon the creatures. However, almost every round fell short, exploding in flashes of psychic energy upon an invisible shield projected by the beast. Then the Blood Angels were forced to shift their aim to the more immediate threat, as a rolling tide of fanged creatures bore down upon them. The air was filled with the hiss of alien beasts and the roar of chainswords as both sides met. This time, however, the power of the alien psychers tipped the odds in the Tyranids' favor. Gaunts fought on with mindless fury, clawing over their bloodmates to get at the Blood Angels. Coils of dark energy lanced out from the leader beasts to send Space Marines to their knees, blood leaking from rents in their helmets. When Dante led a charge against the creatures, they turned their attentions to him, lancing tendrils of power at his mind. Only centuries of psycho-conditioning held the Tyranids' mental assault at bay. Even so, the chapter master faltered, slowed as if running underwater, as he tried desperately to get close enough to the creatures to strike. From across the battlefield, Mephiston saw the beasts turn upon Dante and move to aid his lord. Supported by epistolary Martellos, Mephiston turned his formidable mind to tearing apart the Malaceptor's psychic domination. As the battle raged outside the fire-ringed port, an epic battle of wills unfolded between Mephiston and the trio of Tyranid psychers. Bolts of ruby light warred with twisting tendrils of shadow as the two enemies clashed. At first, the chief librarian seemed to be besting the beast, spears of bloody fire and waves of crimson force crashing into the Tyranids. Several of the closest floating psycho beasts screamed and perished as Mephiston's power touched them, and by degrees the warp field around the creatures weakened. And then the full attention of the Mind Death turned upon Mephiston, and the monstrous alien trio combined their powers. Every Blood Angel upon the field felt the psychic shriek that rolled out from the beast, even though it was directed squarely at the chief librarian. Battle brothers clenched their teeth in agony or let out incoherent yells as their minds were ravaged. Still, their pain was but the barest fraction of what Mephiston felt as the psychic blast crashed into him. The chief librarian's mind filled with a cacophony of monstrous alien thoughts. Any Blood Angel but Mephiston would have perished under the onslaught. Their consciousness burned away like cobwebs before a flame. Only the chief librarian's indomitable will kept him alive, the same control that had seen him master the Black Rage, allowing him to cling to his sanity. Though Mephiston did not fall, his power was broken. As powerful as the chief librarian was, his abilities were like a candle held against the fire of a star, when compared with the enormous power of the hive mind. However, Mephiston's battle with the Mind Death gave Dante the chance he needed. While the Malaceptors focused their attentions on the chief librarian, the chapter master and his guard charged into the nearest beast. Up close, the Ex Mortalis did its work, and Dante drove his weapon deep into the pulsing cranium of a psycho beast. With its death, a baleful scream echoed across the battlefield, and the remaining psychic creatures retreated into the ruins, the swarm rushing in to hold back their enemies. This was not the turning point Dante had hoped for. As the Blood Angels surged forward to crush the Tyranid leadership, the teeming alien broods shifted around them, recovering and attacking once more. Yard by yard, the Space Marines found themselves being pushed back towards the port gates. Though the surviving creatures of the Mind Death had retreated into cover, shoals of lesser leader beasts herded the chitinous hordes forward. Soon the ruined avenues were piled with alien corpses and slick with steaming Xenos blood, drifts and mounds of multi-limbed bodies thick beneath the Space Marines' feet. Yet still the creatures came. Slowly at first, but with greater momentum, the Tyranids pushed the invaders back towards the flaming moat. Dante's brothers rallied around the company's standard, the Blood Angels focusing their defense in its shadow. However, in all his years, Dante had rarely seen a foe so determined and so vicious, and he knew that without support, his bridgehead on Asphodex would soon be overrun. However, just as the commander was about to summon his first company reserves, the thunder of basilisk fire joined the din of battle, and a rolling barrage crashed amongst the aliens. Deafening explosions crept towards the line of ruins, and great geysers of debris and mangled Xenos bodies were hurled into the air. The defenders of Port Hellas were finally making themselves known. Dante was quick to capitalize on his sudden advantage, and before the Tyranids could close the holes in their formation, the Blood Angels counterattacked hard. Isolated broods and beasts were torn apart, and the Sanguinary Guard hacked their way through the wounded alien assault, further sundering it. The basilisk gunners kept up their support barrage, great shells hammering into knots of scuttling beasts, and soon the alien tide dwindled to a trickle. The Tyranids had been driven back for now, yet this reprieve could not last long. Dante looked across the carnage before him, a sea of mangled alien bodies stretching for hundreds of yards in all directions. Here and there a crimson or golden armored form lay amongst the Xenos. Sanguinary priests moved amongst the dead, ministering to these fallen heroes. As he beheld the vision of death, the commander could feel the weight of centuries upon him, memories of other times and other battles. However, nothing compared to this. Today, Dante had witnessed Tyranid threats beyond even his experience. Creatures he had never encountered, evidence of survival instincts amongst the alien leadership. Rarely did Tyranids retreat, nor did they quit a battle until their entire strength had been expended. The trio of psycho-beasts were indeed something new. The sanguinary priests assured Dante that Mephiston would recover from his psychic duel with the hive mind. However, it was a chilling foreshadowing of what might await the chapter on Baal, should Leviathan's rampant development be allowed to continue. Indeed, what horrors might the Tyranids spawn if they consumed the Cryptus system, adding not just trillions of tons of biomass to their fleet, but also the collective combat experience of untold billion weapon beasts. Dante was drawn from his thoughts by the sound of marching footsteps. Looking up, he saw a delegation of Astra Militarum officers descending from the port gates.
So wet.
Two cadets supporting a limping figure between them.
Dry up.
As they drew near, the wounded man offered Dante a weak salute, shrugging off his helpers with apparent irritation. "General Drost, Cadian 185th, the man said, his voice a wounded and weary croak. Dante considered the general for a moment, taking in the torn and blood-stained uniform, the grey, deeply lined skin, and horribly bloodshot eyes. This officer had been through something truly terrible, yet still he had held Port Hellas for days, and against all the odds. Whatever had happened to him, Dante recognized Drost as a hero, a warrior that the commander could respect. "How many survivors remain on Asphodex, General?" Dante asked, turning his head to the ruined battlefield once more. Drost swayed for a moment, one of his men reaching out a concerned hand to support him. The general's response, when it came, hinted at the bottomless well of exhaustion and despair, held in check through willpower alone. "Just us, my lord. We are the last ones." Darktide. The nomadic populace of Lysios had never imagined horrors like those they had now faced. The last of their crawler caravans still strove to stay ahead of the monstrous tidal wave that cursed their world, while struggling to stave off the Tyranid threat. It was into this desperate battle that the flesh tearers plunged, like the angels of the Emperor himself. Gabriel Seth had not hesitated when Commander Dante requested his aid in the defense of Baal. In the valorous company of the Blood Angels, Seth hoped to find salvation for his flesh tearers. For too many years, his chapter had suffered disgrace and suspicion from their allies. That many of the worst atrocities laid at the flesh tearers' door were true did little to quell the chapter master's anger. Seth knew firsthand the ruinous effect the red thirst and black rage could have upon his otherwise noble battle brothers. It was a madness that ran like poison through the very veins of his companies, and only by the spilling of blood could it be sated for a time. These were the thoughts that haunted Seth as he ordered his fleet to Lysios and the relief of the defenders there, as a flotilla of crimson warships raced across their voyage towards the dirty green world. Augurs